Good morning, Mrs. Joshi.
Good
Thank you
morning.
for taking time to help me reflect on my lesson plan.
You're
And
always welcome.
so I was trying to address ELA standards RL 3.2, which talks about recounting stories, including fable, folk tales, and myths, and also determining the central message of the story and how it is conveyed through the key details in the lesson. So I started by introducing students to the terms fable, folktale, and myth, and I understand that I did not go into the detail of the lesson. Now it was difficult for me to focus on a very narrow standard in terms of the timeline. I was trying to accomplish everything in the 45 minutes that I intended the lesson for. Um, so I would like your input on this.
So, what I felt was that as we read the standards, it says it's talking about the key idea and main details of a fable, folktale, and myth. So, essentially, the standards are talking just about the main idea. But the wordings of the standards are very vague and broad and do need a lot more time to be introduced to the kids. Knowing that you had a 45 minutes, I see what your challenge was in terms of meeting that standard. So starting them off with maybe introduction of the words myth fable may be something that you could have done differently with that is just talk about fiction and non-fiction
Mm-hmm.
and address that first in terms of saying what is true, what is not true, and when it is not true, how is it delivered? Because when you talk about fiction, myth, and fables, it is all first initially as a word of mouth. Other kind of fictional writing is done as a written form now, and most of the writing that we now hear is all written form. But the kids need to know that some of this was handed down over the years as a folktale, fable, or myth, and then identifying what the different parts of it means. What is a folk tale? It is a story that is being told over the generations. Or if it's a fable, that means it has more animal characters in it. Or a myth that is not true, but it's something that they believe. Or something that has been told over the years that this is why the dolphins have a sound that they make, or something that explains something in nature. Necessarily not true.
Right.
So, but that takes away from the focus of the um, standard. So
Right.
standard was asking you for what was the main idea
Right.
of that. And so I see where your dilemma was in that. But then I see that you went in for the who, when, what, why, and you got that covered into the lesson plan. So maybe some of them, but they didn't seem to be from their student work to be very confused by it. But that could have been a way that could have been something that if you had known your learners earlier would have helped to see if they knew what that meant ahead of time and introducing it in a different way, or just to focus on what the key idea is.
Right. So the background was this was a summer session in a daycare, and we were trying to work with a small group of students. Unfortunately, there were a couple of challenges in my teaching. There was limitation of space. I did not know exactly what background knowledge students came in with. And
Yes.
also, there was some challenges with the technology. I had planned to show an infographic using a projector. I did not have access to that, so I resorted to writing on the board. That took away,
Yeah.
some of my
Maybe
time.
sometime for something to keep in mind for the next time is to have sentence strips already prepared in case of such emergency.
Right.
Technical glitches are part of teaching life.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of time is wasted in terms of trying to teach something that you had already planned a certain way.
Right.
So if you had the sentence strips explaining your terms, then it would have been easy to use just a glue stick or something, or even just use tape to put
To
them up on the whiteboard and move on with the lesson plan. Because that took a chunk of time for you
Right.
to
I
then
was a
get.
little flustered because it seemed like I was trying to,
Yeah,
look at the
I.
situation and then make do with
But you
what
turned
I
it
had.
around, and that's important.
Thank you.
Because that's what teaching is about. Because it's not always going to be a smooth lesson plan. It's not going to go as you planned it.
Mm-hmm.
And then knowing and identifying that and moving on, and you did that. That's important.
Thank you. So I understand that for next time, I would need to break down my lesson and focus on
Yes.
just one aspect
Of that.
of
So
the
if you
standard.
were identifying what different types of reading material there is available, then just spend a day just talking about that.
Mhm.
Once they gain identification of what the genres are and introducing the right words so that they use it continuously from there on,
Mhm.
not just knowing, oh, this is real fiction, real and unreal writing, or real and fiction, what does it mean, non-fiction and fiction, and then identifying the elements of a fiction writing is the who, what, when, why,
Right.
and identifying the identification of the non-fiction writing is cause and effect, or just having them know that there is a different element to different types of writing could be just one lesson plan,
Okay.
and then having them look from there forward,
Right.
then connecting for them, the connecting dots become easy when it's given in parcels,
Okay.
right? Because if you try to, and you did an awesome job in trying to bring all of them together in one go, but it is hard to make sure that that is completely delivered and that it is understood by the students. So breaking it apart makes it much more easier. So if you had just identified the genres in one, then taken from that to the elements of the different types of genres. So non-fiction requires cause and effect or compare contrast, and then fiction is who, what, when, why. There could be different things for each type of genre, and then identifying the main idea and key details in the third. So
Third lesson.
three parts of this.
Right. So what I tried to do was first talk about who, what, when, where, how, and then connect it to the characters of the story.
Yes, and you did that. You did
you
that.
know what the setting was. So I think looking at that, students were kind of engaged. They enjoyed the video.
Yes.
They did participate in the activities. They were interactive. They were asking questions. Um,
And they seem to have also highlighted all the things that you asked them to on the
right.
page. But here is where the three lessons would have helped. Because had you said the who, what, when, why, the second part, and then just gone and said highlight the who with a
Oh.
color, or circle the who, underline the why, then they would have identified that in that story element a lot better.
Okay. So
As a sample. So for example, in your sample here, if you had said, instead of using just the highlighter, if you had said, why don't you underline all the who's,
okay.
and then circle the whys, or circle where or when, different things for different things, and then write it down as an annotation overlook. So when they are looking at back at their work, they can easily tell you, okay, I underlined who,
Okay.
or I circled why, and then they can say, oh, that's the element that I'm looking at for the story.
Right. Okay, I get it now. So, to just reiterate what you said, having clear, explicit instruction as to what is
Just for the
expected
annotation, like
for-
if for third graders, they are new to annotation, so a lesson on annotation independently of this,
Okay.
just having them, or if that is not something you want to do at that moment in time, you could have just asked them, when you are doing the highlighting, I want you to underline the who's, I want you to circle the when and why, or when and where, I want you to I want you to box the why, those
So,
kind of things. So then that would have help them separate the story elements for themselves and understand it a lot better.
so again, I think I would come back to a couple of challenges. I see what you're saying, and it seems to me now it is even more important to spend time to get to know your
Oh, no
learners
question about that.
and see what they already know. Not go in with an assumption
Right.
that they know how to
But
do
you had
certain
no
things.
choice. You had no choice. This
Right.
was something that you had to do in a classroom for a project, and I know that everybody understands when they are looking at this that the limitations are always there. But it's always good to reflect on it and say, okay, this is all that I could add to, or change, or make with, in terms of making the lesson more approached for and more reachable to the students.
Right. Because I had also planned, considering that they were third graders, I had planned an activity using this foldable, and it had, they could play. I think most of the kids enjoy this tactile, activity. So, and it had questions about, they could ask, pair share and ask questions about, who the characters were, what was the plot. And we spent some time doing this activity, and some of the students had challenges
Making
actually
it.
making it.
Yes.
So the focus at the end of, once they were done, a few students were able to ask questions and do pair share, but I saw that they were distracted from the actual
So
idea of this.
what would you think would be a good change in the in your lesson plan to make sure that that is more, that could be used meaningfully?
I think looking back, I should have had another activity or a precursor to this lesson where
And
they
just
had
making the
already
foldable, yeah,
just made a foldable and practiced using it even as a
as a fun
game,
thing,
fun
yes.
thing. And then when I gave
And
them, they
then
would know
and do
what
you
to
see how if you had them annotated separately with the plot and ideas and they could have used this to share with,
answer
yeah.
questions. So yes, I think this is again. I understand this is my learning experience. Also, there were even within the small group there was wide range of learners. Some students, when I demonstrated how to make this, immediately got it, and there were a couple of them that were struggling with
But that was
folding.
also the age difference, right?
So
There was a mixed age group.
there was a mixed age
Yeah.
group of students. The other thing I wanted to show you were these samples. And the idea of introducing this exit slip was to see their learning. And I'm just going to read a few of them to you. One of the students said, I learned that if you put pebble in water, the water level goes up. The things I found interesting, they said the song on the laptop was interesting. Questions I still have, I do not have a question. The other person wrote, things I learned. One of the things was how to make a fortune teller. Things I found interesting was I liked the video. And question I still have is the story real? Now, looking at this exit ticket did not give me much indication of what they learned about the actual lesson that I was trying to teach, and that was about, the
Yeah.
characters and the plot and what the model is, or how the events take place.
So it's like what they say, any kind of data collection you do, the objective of that data collection should be very clear for you. So if your objective was to just get a feedback from the student, then you've met that objective.
Okay.
But if your objective was specific to what did you learn in today's lesson, then you should have made that very clear to them. So like what was your purpose in the exit slip needs to be very clear when you are teaching it to them. So when you are gathering information from them, then you know that, oh, the three things I want you to write about is what is new that you learned in today's lesson.
Right.
Or you could have phrased it such that they would just address your question for the three things that they learned. Because otherwise it becomes an open-ended response, and there's nothing wrong with getting an open-ended response because you now learn that there was some learning for each child in something, but that was not your goal in the gathering of the data.
Right.
So when you wanted that exit ticket, what was your purpose? What was you envisioning in terms of your end result from this?
I was hoping that students would be able to, because we focused a lot of time understanding, who, what, where, why in a
Yes, and
fable.
yeah.
So I was hoping to see somewhere mentioned that, they learned about fable,
Right.
they learned about the
So
characters.
maybe when you were asking them to do the exit slip, maybe you could have given them
an
model
example.
sentences. Maybe you could have said to them that, there are many things you learn during a day. But what did you learn in this specific time about fables, or who, what, when, why? What are the elements of a fiction story?
Right.
And that would have focused their responses to your data. That data collection then would have been meaningful.
Right. I think I got too optimistic because I was also hoping to have them, use this lesson and write their own story using the character setting and plot. So I think I underestimated the time it requires. And also, again, it was a broad focus. So I think as a reflection on my lesson and what I would change, I think that having, again, clear, explicit instructions would help. Having, again, spending a lot
Breaking
more
up
time.
also, I think breaking up the lesson in two parts, or making it so when you're looking at the 45 minutes of the lesson, you want to see that you have the pre, the post, and the teaching in between.
Right.
Sometimes when you do that, like for example, in your learning, you mentioned that the cookie catcher took the longest time,
Right.
or making the foldable took the longest time. So just having that done earlier, some of that is planning that you will come to when you work with the experience of being into it. But some of it you could have maybe checked and seen that, okay, timing it, actually doing it with yourself.
Spending time and
But you doing it and the child doing it, add 5 minutes to it.
right.
So then you see that, oh, this will take a longer time. I need to change it, or I need to break this lesson plan into two lessons, one one each day, or have two plays, plan the lesson for 2 days. That way, then this is better delivered.
And strategy wise, I think I would add some more, you know, probably hands on activities and give them, I would think that giving them a, a sample of what is expected in terms of even highlighting or giving them specific directions about what I'm expecting in terms of characters or plot and setting, giving being more specific about the
Yeah, I mean, I like that
examples
you
would
had this story there for highlighting. If you had just told them that, maybe underline the who's or circle the whys, then the using of the foldable to discuss and pair share would have been a lot more meaningful, because then they would have just looked at their own highlights and seen. But this was all in one. They did highlight all the things that you required them to. But then going and hunting for it again is a waste of time in some ways.
okay.
So had you done the identification of having circled the something, underlined some things, boxed something else, put it in quotes or whatever, just
Having the
separating all, yeah,
distinction
yeah,
between
and just separating
different
all the
elements.
information. So looking at a story and then dividing it into the who, why, when, what,
Okay.
or use different highlight colors. Just those things could have helped them play that game with the
The
foldables
project.
a lot better. So just identifying those and knowing your learners, of course, going back to that, you didn't know them, and that was the hardship.
Right. I think that was the biggest challenge. And again, I feel that had I spent more time just, you know, understanding um, what their needs are, because from what the daycare person told us, it did seem like they were special needs students or students with disability. And I think in an actual classroom, we cannot assume.
Right. But then
So,
in an actual classroom, you will also have that information.
right.
So if considering that you went in there with no idea of who the kids were, this was a well done lesson.
Thank you so much. Do you have any input about the classroom management? I know we
No, you
went
did a
over
fabulous
the
job in
rules.
introducing the rules, and you made sure that they understood them. That was the beginning of the classroom, and you did that and laid out the foundation for a good class expectation. So you should continue doing that. I liked that you had given the clear instructions in terms of when you walked through with what the worksheet was supposed to be done. And so therefore they were able to highlight. They highlighted it in one color, but they highlighted the right things, and that's important to know, that they did highlight what you had asked them to highlight, and that I think it was because of the instructions that you gave them. This is what I want you to do. You had them repeat them. You had them talk about it. So that was very good.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.